Hello and welcome to the Learning Love Podcast, brought to you by the Learning Love Foundation, helping people transform how they love, live, and lead. I'm your host, Dr. Mark A. Hicks, and I want to thank you for joining us today as we spend some time learning love.
Love is the answer. Now all we have to do is explore all the questions. And today's question is, what about those snide comments, those humorous things, those little put downs that we do with our friends or maybe our family when our spouse or partner is the butt of the joke, the one we're putting down? What I'm talking about here is that stereotype of the guys hanging out and and one of the guys saying, "Well, boys, I got to go. The old ball and chain is going to get angry with me if I don't get home." Or the girls are hanging out and one of them is saying, "My husband is driving me crazy. You won't believe what he did the other day." Is that fair game? Okay. A lot of people might argue that it's just funny or that it's just blowing off steam, or hey, you need to talk about it. If you're upset about something, you need to get it off your chest, and talking to your friends is a good place to do that. There's a fine line here, a nuance that we really need to see, and it's going to make a huge difference in your relationship with your spouse or partner. And not understanding what we're talking about today is one of the primary causes of divorce. There are studies that show that what we talk about today, is the number one reason for divorce. And people may say, "Are you kidding? The fact that I told a little joke or I blew off a little steam with my friends is the number one reason for divorce?" Yeah, yeah, and I'm going to explain why. But first, let's define what we're talking about. If you are in an abusive relationship, if you are experiencing toxic behavior on a regular basis, by all means, talk about it. Do not keep that a secret. Abuse is never meant to be in secret. Abusers thrive in secrecy. Abusers thrive on the notion that we don't air our dirty laundry in public. We don't talk about family matters. That's where abuse thrives. So if you are experiencing abuse, toxic behavior, absolutely talk about that, preferably with a professional, with a therapist, with a counselor, with a relationship coach, someone who really understands what you're dealing with in that relationship. But yes, it's fine to talk to friends and family. It is good to get that out in the open. Or even if you suspect that you are in an abusive relationship. Sometimes there's some gray areas. You're not really sure when you're in the midst of it. Things are really good sometimes. Sometimes they're bad. You just don't know if this is reaching the level of abuse, particularly when you're talking about emotional and verbal abuse. It's hard to draw that line. Is this just normal marital fighting and arguing, or is this really become abusive? And so don't keep that a secret. Absolutely get that out. Again, preferably with a professional, but at least with friends or family that you can trust. But today, I'm not talking about exposing abusive behavior. I'm talking about getting together with your friends and making those little snide comments, talking about all the ways your spouse drives you crazy, may have those little shots that you take, the old ball and chain, all those things that we sometimes get in the habit of doing with our friends. We put down, we criticize, we take out our frustrations and talk about all the ways our spouse drives us crazy, all the ways that woman or that man is just getting under our skin lately, all the things that they've done that we just find annoying and that everyone sits around and laughs about. They sit around and they laugh and they joke about it and they do the put downs, and it becomes this whole gang of, you think that's bad, let me tell you about my wife, or you think that's bad, let me tell you what my husband did. And it becomes this group effort to just beat up our spouses, to just beat up our partners and put them down. And if this is a group you meet with on a regular basis, and that becomes the habit, we get together and we just grap about our spouses. We get together and we make jokes about our spouses. That can lead to some very serious problems. Again, people might argue, well, I'm just blowing off steam, or I need to get off my chest somewhere. If there is something really, truly bothering you about what your spouse is doing, the person to talk about that with is your spouse. If there's really one thing, two things that they're doing that are just, you just can't deal with it, that is a time to talk that out. That's a time for a little thing we call communication. If you want to have a good relationship, you have to communicate things that are not always easy and not always pleasant to talk about. But discussing that these are some things that are really bothering me. These are some things that are really on my nerves. And here's what I'm going to bet happens. When you are faced with the idea of actually discussing it with your spouse, actually saying, this is bothering me, this is on my nerves, I really need for this to change, I need for this to stop, this behavior needs to be altered in some way. When you are faced with actually having that conversation, I'm going to bet many times, maybe not all, but many times, you're going to come to the conclusion, it's not really that big a deal. It's not really a big enough deal to bring it up to my spouse and have them change. It's not really that big a thing. Because when we get with our friends and our family, maybe our siblings, and we start making fun of our spouses and putting them down and criticizing them, it becomes a group effort. It becomes this whole big gang of wolves thing that we just pile on and we find something to talk about, and it becomes habit. And it becomes fun. Because let's face it, it's fun to put people down. We like that. As human beings, we just find this sick humor of we love to put people down, even people we love. Maybe especially people we love that do get on our nerves sometimes, because everybody gets on everybody's nerves sometimes if you live with them long enough. And so it's just kind of fun to put people down and to make fun of people. And that becomes a safe space to have this brand of humor where we criticize and fuss and put down in a way that's socially supported and gets a few laughs. But if we actually said, maybe I should talk to my spouse about this, well, probably, maybe not always, but probably figure out a lot of those things weren't really worth discussing. It wasn't that bad. We don't need to really upset them or try to push them to change something that's not really that big a deal. It was just something we said in the moment. It was just something we decided it's just something we decided would be funny to share with our friends and to be part of the discussion of putting down our spouses. This becomes a habit in some groups. It becomes a habit in some friend groups or families and siblings to just criticize and to put down and to make fun of. Here is the problem. The number one reason for divorce, the number one reason people get divorced is contempt. Contempt for one another. When you start getting the eye rolls, when you start getting those little snide remarks that aren't with the friends anymore, that you bring them home and you take that cheap shot, when you start nitpicking your spouse's behavior, not discussing big things they're doing wrong that really upset you, but the little things that you've just decided are annoying, and you start nitpicking those things, that is the number one reason for contempt. When you have that attitude If your spouse says something and you roll your eyes and walk away, when you have the attitude of, why are you doing that again? When you have that attitude towards your spouse, it is the number one reason for divorce. When you develop contempt for your spouse, marriages generally don't last. And if they do, they're not very healthy. And that contempt is often bred in those groups with friends, family, siblings, where you were just having fun, putting down your spouse, finding some things to criticize, making fun of them, telling stories of what they did wrong or how they bungled something to get a laugh. And it is hard to get into that habit. And you do that with your friend group, with your siblings, with your extended family on a regular basis, and then come home and really be close to your spouse. Really be close to them, have a good relationship with them, have open conversation with them. It's really hard when you get into that habit of looking for the things that you can criticize, looking for the things you can make fun of, looking for the thing you can say in the next friend group meeting to criticize your spouse, to put them down, to make fun of them. When you are looking at your spouse's behavior to find new material for the next friend group meeting, it's going to be really hard to be close to that person, to really have a healthy relationship with them, to really show love and affection and kindness and compassion to the person you are married to or you're living with, that person you're building a life with. It may seem like harmless fun to get together with your friend group and everybody criticizes their spouse, but if you're doing that on a regular basis, if that's kind of the vibe of the friend group, is we get together and we gripe about our husbands, or we get together and gripe about our wives, even if you don't say that out loud, if it has become sort of the rhythm of, oh, let me tell you what my spouse did this week. If that is the rhythm of the group, that is going to be a habit that you're going to end up bringing into your marriage. You're going to be looking for that new material. You're going to be finding that criticism. You're going to be finding that story that you can use to put them down. And there's going to be more of the eye roll mentality when they do things. There's going to be more of an attitude of, oh, there you go again, every time they make some little mistake. And when you start developing that kind of attitude, that you're always looking to criticize, always looking to put down or make fun of, it develops contempt. And contempt for your spouse is the number one reason for divorce. It is the number one predictor that people will divorce, when there is contempt for that spouse. So break that habit. If you are in a group, or if your siblings get together, or your extended family gets together, and the habit is to start telling stories, making fun of, putting down, criticizing your spouse, and that's just the rhythm of the group. That's the material they go to make fun and to laugh at and to roll their eyes at what that spouse did this week. You got to start breaking that habit. I'm not saying you have to end that relationship with that friend group, but don't participate. Don't tell the stories. And maybe find a way to tell a different story. Something that happened at work, something that happened at the shopping mall that you saw happen, a different story from your life where somebody did something silly or somebody did something dumb. Spread it out a little bit. Don't just pick on your wife or your husband all the time. Spread it out, because there's lots of things that happen in life that are funny stories, that are ridiculous things that we can talk about. Start spreading it out so that you're not just bashing your spouse, because that gets into your mind, it gets into your heart, and you'll bring it home. You may think you won't, but you will. You'll start looking for new material for the next group meeting. And so, find other ridiculous things to talk about. Find other silly things to talk about with that friend group. Start spreading out your stories. Don't pick on your spouse, because you do not want to treat your spouse as humor material for your friend group. You don't want to find yourself looking for those criticisms, those ways to put down, because it leads to contempt, and that leads to destruction in a relationship. The number one reason for divorce. So watch that. It may start innocent enough. It may start in a way that you didn't mean any harm. You were just having fun with your friends. You were just blowing off steam. You were just rolling your eyes and getting something off your chest with your friends, and everybody had a good laugh about it. It can be very innocent. You may not have intended to do any harm, but pay attention. It is going to cause harm. And so break that habit, get out of that rhythm. And if you want to stay in that friend group, find other things, other stories to tell that don't involve your spouse. If you want to have a healthy marriage, this is one of the areas we need to work on. It's too easy to use those criticisms to get a good laugh from our friends. Don't fall into that temptation. Always treat your spouse with respect, even if they're not there. And when we do, it leads to a better relationship. And that's my thoughts this week, as we are looking to build the relationships that we want, need, and deserve in our life. Before we sign off today, I want to remind you to go to my YouTube channel at Mark A. Hicks Video. Mark A. Hicks Video on YouTube. And you can not only find the Learning Love podcast, but you'll also find my new show, Today's Insight. That's where I talk about the news, world events, cultural issues through a lens of compassion, decency, connection, and love. It's how to view the world in all its chaos and work to be a decent person anyway. So check it out on YouTube at Mark A. Hicks Video. Thank you for listening this week. Until next week, love well, everyone.